major one that's particularly interesting is this cut in the price of gas. Ukraine had predicted that it would have to import 26 billion cubic metres of gas from Russia this year. A 33% cut on that will save them billions and billions of dollars. Now, interesting as well, Vladimir Putin has said that the deal is not tied to conditions. Interestingly, though, some Ukrainian officials are suggesting the deal might be conditional on a private agreement he's made with the President Viktor Yanukovych not to sign any deal with the EU. Meanwhile, these discussions of a customs union in Moscow, of course, still going on too.
And what about Ukraine? I mean, why does it need this money in the first place?
Essentially, the country is in serious financial difficulty. It's in its third recession since 2008, and it has $60 billion worth of debts to pay back in the coming year. It's actually running out of money. Its central bank reserves have been depleted so much. Now, Viktor Yanukovych and his government have been trying to avoid going to the International Monetary Fund because the conditions the IMF wants to impose for a loan are too strict. They include things like cutting the price subsidy that exists in Ukraine for gas. Now, the IMF's managing director, Christine Lagarde, recently said that they were ready to help Ukraine if Ukraine wants to help its economy to go in the right direction. All this has affected, of course, Ukraine's credit ratings on the international markets. Fitch, the latest ratings agency, to downgrade them to B-, just a couple of notches above junk, the same level as Greece and Cyprus. As it happens, Fitch says that with Ukraine's borrowing costs at around 10%, well over that bailout territory of 7%, the country is effectively locked out of the international bond markets, and that's why it's ended up needing this loan and this bailout from Russia.
OK, Stephen's going to take us to Brussels next. There's been progress made there on efforts to create a banking union, hasn't there?
Yeah, it's been a long night for the Eurozone finance ministers in Brussels. They've been working on a fund which is to help wind up failing banks, avoiding a situation like we saw in Spain and Ireland, where the state had to bail out the banking sector. Now, the deal that has been agreed overnight by Eurozone finance ministers has two elements. One is a common EU bank rescue fund called a Single Resolution Mechanism. That's going to be in place in about 10 years' time, hopefully, but it's going to be funded by a levy to be placed on European banks. The real political difficulty in these talks was what happens in the meantime if there's a banking crisis. The European ministers have agreed that they will put together a emergency interim funding that will come from the banks themselves and also be backed by the EU's bailout fund, the European Stability Mechanism. Now, this deal, of course, still has to be agreed by the other European finance ministers, that meeting taking place later today, and to be approved by European leaders in their European Council meeting on Thursday and Friday.
Now, of course, the markets have been particularly preoccupied recently by the Federal Reserve in recent weeks. Now, we're expected to hear from Chairman Ben Bernanke later, aren't we?
Yeah, the last time, in fact, he'll do his press conference later this Wednesday. We'll be watching closely, though, of course, to see if the Fed decides to rein in its $85 billion a month monetary stimulus programme. The Fed has said that it will taper its spending once the economic recovery in the United States picks up. That's led to jitters in the markets to see, as any good economic data comes, the markets are worried that the Fed will eventually turn off the tap on the money it's pumping into the economy. The majority of economists surveyed by Reuters news agency say they don't expect this taper to happen before March, but it's still worrying investors. Let's take a look at what the figures are in Asia this Wednesday. The Nikkei managing to avoid the cautiousness over the Fed. It's up over 2% in trading today. Investors doing their best to claw back on those recent losses. The rest of the Asian markets fairly muted in trading.
And finally, everyone, of course, wants to raise a little bit of money. Facebook, though, they've come up with a new way, haven't they?
Yes, this is going to be very controversial, I can already tell. Facebook is going to put video ads in your newsfeed, so when you're scrolling through, they will play automatically with no sound.
Oh, how irritating.
Well, I think that's going to be the reaction of most people, actually, yeah. But it is a very important revenue source for them. They've had difficulty in integrating ads into Facebook. They've managed to do it to a certain extent. This is just a new way for them to make money. It's going to start with a trial of a film advert. It'll only affect users in the US on Thursday, but investors pleased anyway. Facebook shares closing up 2%.
That is going to irritate me, I have to say. All right, Stephen, thanks a lot, though. Stephen Carroll, irritating us all here on Fosbank Act. Coming up shortly, we've got trick shots for you from a Frisbee champion. Web news, though. Today, starting with a story of pianists amid the protesters in Ukraine.
Ukraine is not dead yet. Protesters there singing the national anthem outside the presidential offices of Viktor Yanukovych. There's a pianist in the middle of this spontaneous choir. He often joins the protesters in Kiev's Independence Square. He's there to encourage the Ukrainians who've been braving the cold for weeks now, demanding their country builds closer ties with the European Union. And And this unknown pianist isn't the only musician trying to rouse the pro-Europe protesters. As we can see from these videos published by the site Liga.net, employees from the Kiev Music Academy recently set up one of their pianos in front of the city hall to help keep protesters' spirits up. And over the past few days, musicians have also been playing inside the building. Kiev City Hall has great symbolic significance for opposition activists and is being used, in particular, as a place for protesters to rest after hours of demonstrations in nearby Independence Square. And as this Twitter picture shows, they sometimes perform for security forces. We see a man playing a piano bearing the colours of the European Union in front of a row of riot police. The two Spanish journalists, El Mundo newspaper correspondent Javier Espinosa and independent photographer Ricardo Garcia Villanova, who were kidnapped by al-Qaeda-linked radicals in Syria on September 16th, are still being held. Friends and family are extremely concerned for their safety and have been campaigning for their release. Javier Espinosa's wife, Monica Garcia Prieto, produced this video posted to YouTube last week to raise international public awareness and also to mark the 3-month anniversary of their abduction. Speaking in English and subtitled in Arabic, she addresses the kidnappers directly, asking them to show clemency and release the two journalists at the earliest possible opportunity.
Honor the revolution they protect and set them free.
Social networkers have also been campaigning for their freedom. This Facebook group for the missing Spanish journalist, for example, has some 5,200 members. Web users can also voice their support under the #FreeJavier_Ricardo Twitter hashtag and express their concern regarding the fate of the missing news professionals. Thousands of Asian Americans have been posting under the Not Your Asian Sidekick Twitter hashtag, sharing stories or grievances on how they're perceived and stereotyped. Clichés about their culture, for example, their physical appearance, or how people assume they're highly educated. The aim of this social media movement is to highlight the problem and change people's mindsets. This alleged sneaked photo of Nelson Mandela lying in state has been the subject of much outrage since it was posted online last week. Countless web users have described it as shameless, saying sharing this type of image shows a complete lack of respect for the former South African president. The controversial photo has since been exposed as a fake, however, and was actually taken during an ANC party congress in 1991, when Madiba briefly closed his eyes. This photo competition was launched on community site Reddit a few weeks ago and involves decking out your cat with a paper cutout mouth, giving it a kind of human-like facial expression. Smiling, serious, sneering, web users have been having a field day. Some of the cats, however, haven't been quite so enthusiastic. Brodie Smith certainly knows how to throw a frisbee, and throughout the year he posts short clips to Twitter's video sharing service Vine to show web users what he's capable of. He's now produced this compilation of his best trick shots of 2013, and it's available to view on YouTube.
Time to break in the new frisbee.
Hello.
Little help? Sports. Tough rock.
Impressive stuff. I still want to know how many takes, though. That's it from me for now. More, of course, coming up very, very shortly here on France 24, including the latest situation in South Sudan after the break.